to our next episode. Ugh. This thing just probably describes my mood about this episode, but let's get into it. This is Going to Seed. So our episode begins at Sweet Apple Acres, bright light cracked on early, where the Applejacks are prepared for basically a harvest. But not any harvest, as Applejack explains, while the other apples, other than Granny Smith, are barely trying to wake up.
A harvest 100 moons in the making. When every apple comes ripe at the same time. Big Mac's been up late working on this schedule so he can be sure not to miss a single tree.
So this harvest is called the conduit, where essentially basically all the apples have to basically get all the harvest all the apples in the right time after every 100 moons. And given the whole issues with the time scaling of the show, it's hard to tell how long that is. But essentially, there's a chart where each apple has their own specific section to work on, where it seems like Applejack and Big Mac are taking the bulk of the work, while Apple Bloom only has one section and Granny Smith has another. But given how every pony seems to be relatively tired, it seems like a lot for just the four of them. But Granny Smith actually brought reinforcements, and that reinforcement is Golden Delicious. Yeah, Big Mac is essentially me when I'm just really tired after staying up late.
That'd be delicious!
Granny told me I could use a helping her with this here confidence, so I came running.
Well, with the harvest this big, we're grateful for all the help we can get.
And before anybody asks, one thing that I just skipped over is that, which is also very convenient of the episode, is that Twilight and the other members of the main six are too busy running the friendship school. Which kind of makes you wonder why exactly not one of them is able to kind of take over for a bit, or even on the off chance asking Discord. But then again, we know how well that went last time Discord was asked to do anything at the friendship school, and I'd rather not think about it. But Granny Smith then decides to talk about a certain legend with regards to this specific harvest.
The great seedling? Well now, I haven't thought about that old mare's tail for years.
A great seedling ain't no mare's tail.
These are magical birds speaking.
Oh, the colors of the harvest that travels from farm to farm, daring ponies to catch it. And those that have the ingenuity are rewarded with crops that are always in bloom. And he's real, that's you and me.
I do like the facial expressions in this episode. So this legend is the Great Seedling, and based on how Golden Delicious described it, it's basically sort of like a summer to fall reindeer looking creature that essentially basically gives lasting crops that last through even the coldest weathers if you're able to catch it. And it's basically honestly a good legend to kind of bring up. Of course, Applejack kind of is being cynical about the whole thing and wants to focus on the work, but Apple Bloom is actually more excited to even, well, take a crack at it.
Maybe I'm big enough now to finally catch him. With me.
Like I said, one of the positives I will give this episode is just the huge expressions with the faces in regards to the animation. It is very expressive. That just makes me crack a smile. So after the theme, Applejack continues to be a cynic about the whole thing and tells Apple Bloom that work has to be a bit more of a priority.
You haven't hunted for the great seedling since you were little. Why would you want to start again now?
Because she's still a kid? Where the hell have you been?
The confluence is so big. He's bound to show up. And his potential he'll make all the apples ripe all the time. Right, Goldie?
That's right, young Billy.
Oh, just imagine. Sweet Apple Acres would be the busiest orchard in Equestria. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got work to do. Don't forget we have actual work to do, too.
I understand, Applejack, given that it's work, but even though it doesn't seem that way, she's still like, what, 10, 11? She's still a kid. What do you want from her?
Nothing like a little Billy
Yeah, so if Granny Smith says it's okay, then who are you to argue with that? So essentially we see that, well, as we can see clearly, Big Mac is completely sleep deprived as the apples, excluding Apple Bloom, get to work on the harvest. And again, Apple Bloom is basically working to catch a seedling. And we get this cool Street Fighter moment from Applejack. Big Mac's like, show off. And we also see that even in her age, we do see that Golden Delicious is not really, well, that kind of strong of a bucker.
As much as I appreciate her volunteering, I'm not sure how much help Goldie's going to be.
Oh, now that reminds me of the time Dottie, that's my cheetah, you understand.
But we do see in this scene that I find very interesting is that even in her age, Granny Smith is still able to actually buck some apples kind of alright. And she seems to be doing a good job and wasn't able to, like, fall over backwards like Golden Delicious just did. So it's pretty interesting to note that even in her age, Granny Smith still knows how to buck off some apples. Meanwhile, Applejack is still having some reservations about Apple Bloom chasing the great seedling, and it seems very unlikely she's going to help work on it. So Big Mac has to redo the organizational chart that he helped form, which basically caused him to sleep deprivation.
And as much as I'd rather Apple Bloom were helping, I guess there's no harm in her hunting the great seedling for a day, right? Big Mac! Gotcha! Aw, you ain't the great seedling.
Nope.
So the next day, the apples have to get ready for the work, as we see that Big Mac had to reorganize the chart from yesterday and had to stay up all night to do it, and could barely stand on his own 2 legs.
He was just up late working out a new schedule so we could stay on track. I didn't sleep either. I'm so excited. I can't wait to see if I caught the great seedling. I hope you're ready to cheer Apple Bloom up when her traps come up empty. Every pony, come quick!
But it turns out there seems to be like oh my god, the aliens from science are here! Quick, grab some boarded up wood and water!
The great seedling did this, didn't he? What?
Or maybe the aliens from science basically tried to get into Sweet Apple Acres, but they couldn't get past as wooden doors.
Oh, great, my man. These sure look like great seedling tracks to me.
So even though this excites Apple Bloom to really no avail, this further annoys Applejack a bit to get him a little bit annoyed with Golden Delicious.
Why,
That's just what I'm gonna do. Look out, great seedling. Here I come. Now, why would you go and do a thing like that?
you think like what?
You know what I mean. We got enough work to do without you distracting Apple Bloom by making some apple tracks and pretending the great seedling did it.
I did no such thing.
What in the tater tarnation would make you say a thing like that? Well, some pony did it, and she sure seems to be enjoying this quite a lot.
I'm enjoying it because Apple Bloom's enjoying it.
Yeah, Listen, I get that's kind of the point of the episode, and this honestly kind of leads to a point where I will give this episode this. At first, it gives me the idea that it's going to be what exactly it's going to be, that Golden Delicious and Granny Smith are kind of working together to help Apple Bloom on this, when really they're the ones that are doing all this. So I don't blame Applejack for being cynical and wanting to stay on track with work. I don't have a problem with that. It does get kind of a bit grating at points, but like I said, I get the point, and I get that's where the episode is going. So basically, Applejack tries to talk to Apple Bloom to see if she is willing to help him out on the next day of the harvest, given how Applejack had to take, basically, Big Mac had to take over Apple Bloom's share of the orchard.
Well, today, are you sure you want to spend time trying to catch something that might not even be real? What? But the great seedling is real. You saw the tracks. You think those appeared all by themselves? I don't know who made the tracks, but I don't think it was the great seedling. Why not? Because the great seedling is just something to make the harvest fun for youngins. And you're old enough now to know that there's a time for fun and there's a time
I get it, Applejack, but like I said earlier, your sister is now like, what, 10, 11? She's still a kid. What do you want from her?
Well, catching the great seedling is helping. You can make the trees blossom all the time. All right.
So Applejack reluctantly gives in and basically says that if she helps Apple Bloom for the day, she'll help on working with her to catch the great seedling. In exchange, Apple Bloom helps her with the harvest.
Kinda looks like those seedling tracks, huh? Sure. If there were hundreds of apples in a bunch of different lines, would...
Well, like I said, I'm sure the aliens from Sun had something to do with this.
Well, if enough apples fell or got knocked down, by the wind, maybe. Or animals. I'm just saying there's a lot of possible explanations.
And one of them is the great seedling.
And the rest of them ain't. That ain't what you thought when you was a fool.
So we then basically see that Granny Smith lets the cat out of the bag that apparently during the same time at the same harvest, Applejack was essentially basically wanting to do the harvest and check all the traps, but essentially she gave up on the dream when she accidentally fell into her own trap, and apparently no pony even bothered to help her out of the hole.
But the day stuck in that trap.
Yeah, apparently no pony went inside to look for their daughter. And I do say daughter because we also see in this flash Mac of Bright Mac and Pear Butter in the same scene, where we do see Bright Mac basically give Big Mac his harness, and we also see the Pear Butter with its Apple Bloom as basically just a little foal. And that kind of raises a whole lot of questions about the time scaling in regards of Applejack's parents. I would go deeper into it, but I am not a Apple historian to figure out how this exactly all works. But essentially because Applejack fell into the hole, and I'm now realizing that apparently no pony went to look for her, or even try to figure out what had happened to her during the day, or even try to help her, so my only conclusion is that Applejack had to climb out of the hole that she dug up on her own.
Because of me. So I decided right then and there I was too old to waste any more time on the great sea. Oh, we finished the harvest just fine, but we laughed about that story for years.
Did you also leave out the part that you kind of left your granddaughter in the hole? And like I said, I'm assuming that she had to climb out of the hole on her own. So, whatever. So, Apple Bloom basically begs Applejack to be a part of this, and essentially Applejack basically gives in and then decides to help Apple Bloom on the harvest, and thus we get a montage of the two of them actually setting traps for one another, and while we do see the two of them bonding, it basically also interferes with their work, as they're more focused on making the traps as opposed to, well, helping out with working, and this kind of leads to a problem with the episode where basically Applejack kind of had a point earlier, because the apples have a very busy lifestyle, and the fact of the matter is that they're basically so hell-bent on making these traps together that essentially it kind of takes away a lot from their work. And setting up the time for the traps, again, is kind of taking more time for Big Mac to do all the work. Because given how Apple Bloom's store, half of the orchard, had to be taken over by Big Mac, it makes you believe that Big Mac had to do more of the work. So essentially the next morning, Apple Bloom and Applejack see, well, more apple trails to be had, and we see that Applejack is pretty much just as involved about basically chasing the great seedling as much as Apple Bloom is.
This must have taken all night.
Nothing. Huh? I checked all the tracks near the track. Everyone was sprung, but they're all empty. Every track sprung? No way, Christian. Or the wind. I can't believe I'm saying this, but maybe the great seedling really was here.
Well, I guess we see that Applejack finally gave in, and like I said, she's now fully invested with helping Apple Bloom with this.
Yesterday you said the great seedling was just something to make the harvest fun for youngins.
That was before
time in the schedule for us to set traps, right?
Yep.
And this kind of leads to a thing in regard to this episode. Now listen, I get the idea what this episode is going for, whereas it's basically teaching you, as well as for the adults, that you're never too old to want to chase not only a dream, but you're not too old to think that you're a kid. Even if your body tells you you're different, it's not saying that you're not too afraid to essentially act like a kid, even if you're just chasing an old dream. I like the idea, but the execution is very off-putting, which kind of leads to the point that I'm bringing up, is the fact that because Applejack and Apple Bloom are basically now spending more time springing the traps, we basically see Big Mac having to do all the work, and he's basically completely sleep deprivated and pretty much has to do everything. And believe me, as somebody who feels like, even not only at college, but even at work, it feels like that I'm the one that has to do everything, I can definitely understand Big Mac's plight. And that's definitely a problem with the episode, where unfortunately it's so frustrating where, well, some other people on the team are slacking off and you feel like you're the one person that literally has to do everything. It gets to the point where it just becomes frustrating. So seeing Big Mac having to do all of the work while Applejack and Apple Bloom basically slack off, it basically, I understand his plight.
Oh.
But that doesn't make any sense. How can all these trees be bare if we haven't bumped them yet?
Seems like more work than a great seedling to me.
Or basically just based off of the fact that you put your brother in charge to do everything. So anyways, later that night, Apple Bloom and Applejack basically continue to basically, well, hunt for the great seedling, and Big Mac essentially gets frustrated to the point where, amazingly, he doesn't really snap at them to get them to snap out of it. But essentially, we then see the Apple sisters being on the lookout as Applejack decides to stay up late. As we then get this humorous bit where she passes out, we see Applejack's drooling face. Like I said, the facial expressions in this episode do give me life. But then we see basically Apple Bloom wake up Applejack where they think they caught the great seedling. And at first, the episode thinks that it actually makes us believe it's real. And it does a pretty good job of convincing to the point where the great seedling actually chases them. But then we find out that the great seedling is...
Big Mac! He's been harvesting in his sleep this whole time. Big Mac is the great seedling!
Like I said, I love the facial expressions. Now, like I said, I will give this episode credit because, like I said earlier, at first I thought this episode was going to make us believe that Granny Smith and Golden Delicious had a hand in making the facade and that they were the ones that were trying to pretend that they were the great seedling. But I really like this episode gives us a good fake out, and it's something that I really didn't see coming, with Big Mac essentially bucking all the apples while sleepwalking in the middle of the night. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie, episode, I didn't see that coming. And we do get this humorous bit where I'm sure Big Mac probably should have snapped at any moment.
Hey, Big Mac? Thanks to all of Big Mac's late night work, we brought in the whole harvest with time to spare.
No wonder you were so tired all the time.
Yeah, because basically his sisters had to leave him to do all the work while they were slacking off to actually try to catch the great seedling, which as far as we know is still not real, and he basically was sleep deprived for the entire episode.
I'm glad we solved the mystery, but I really wanted to catch the great seedling before I get too old to try. You know what, Sugar Cube? You're never too old to be a fiddler. There will always be work to do, but having fun together is something you never grow out of.
Now, this is like what I said. The moral on paper, I don't think is a bad one to teach. I really don't. And I think it's something that, that you're never too old to act like a kid. I really like the idea of the moral. It's just that the execution leaves a lot of conflicting messages, and on top of that, it's kind of very counterintuitive. So Golden Delicious leaves, and we also find out that all of her cats fit into this one bag. But then she finds a carrot trail, and Apple Bloom and Applejack kind of get an idea.
You know what this means?
Time for another hunt! Look out, Great Seedling! Here we go!
Alright, so that was Going to Seed, and I really have conflicting feelings about this episode. I think this episode's okay. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just okay. Now, positive-wise, I will say about this episode is that I really love the facial expressions, and I really like how, well, basically, I like the idea of the moral, and it's not a bad moral to teach. Those are two positives I will get, and this episode did give me a few chuckles when basically Golden Delicious is overacting as well. So there were a couple of funny bits in there, and I like the idea of the moral of saying that you're never too old to be either chasing a dream, or you're never too old to think that you won't act like a kid. The execution, on the other hand, is for the kind of lackluster, if I'm being honest. Because while I do like the idea, the reality is that the execution of this episode, as far as the moral goes, is pretty lackluster. The fact that Applejack basically gets so involved with it that she's willing to drop the work, and both her and Apple Bloom basically put all of the work on the Big Mac, where essentially he is sleep deprived to do everything. It's kind of a bad look, and the fact of the matter is that the real world is that when you're working on a team, on a real job, you cannot slack off. And some of the worst case scenarios is that when the people are slacking off, get off scot-free, and the people that do the actual work are punished. Fortunately for me, that hasn't happened, but I feel like that's been the case, so I can understand Big Mac's plight. And I'm not going to lie, that twist is, while this episode did make me think one thing, I'm glad it did turn around with another thing with that twist. But overall, the episode just itself, and the execution, the moral, was really boring and lackluster. So, as a whole, what do I think of this episode? Well, I'll give it this. It's certainly better than Sweet and Smoky, but compared to the other string of episodes this season, this episode's pretty boring and lackluster. So, as a whole, I'd probably say Going to Seed, I'd probably give it a C. It's not particularly bad, but it's not particularly good. And I like the idea, but the execution was really boring and overall lackluster to me. So yeah, final ranking of Going to Seed is a C. Alright. Cannot believe we're... Alright, so 10 episodes down, only 16 to go. Why am I making myself more sad the more I say those things? Alright, so next time we are going to be looking at Student Conceal. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.